Hey everybody, welcome back to Something Pretty, your favorite Deadwood podcast. I'm joined by Clay. Clay, how are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be back in the saddle, as it were.
Yeah,
it's been
one leg
a
up.
Bit.
One leg up, one in the mud, tied up, inebriated, and swearing at your doctor.
However, I will say I'm not in the best condition I could be because currently the entire area of my fucking asshole is one gigantic throb. I have no idea what's going on down there.
You just need a generously proportioned prostitute standing behind you. What was the saying? Behind every great man, there's a woman pegging him, or whatever. Yeah. we can all get to that point. This episode had me wondering one thing. There's a scene where we're going to be talking about a lie agreed upon, part 2. There's a little bit of almost like a vignette-y weird scene that happens between Trixie and Charlie as they're waiting for another character to come out, and she offers him. Trixie offers Charlie a blowjob, and he says, "What?" And she says a blowjob, a nice open air blowjob, which got me wondering, do I undervalue location in oral sex? Because I didn't think open air was going to be anything that really added anything to the algebra there, but apparently it's something that you use to put a cherry on the top of what you're offering. I never considered it.
I mean, she is a professional, so she knows all the ins and outs, as it were.
Open air seems like something that a man of confidence would request, right? Like, I would think open air would be unappealing. You'd want like back of the chariot or whatever they're riding in on, or like behind the stables or something like that. But
the prostitutes in Deadwood are a special breed. You can choose open air. You can choose mid exposition.
Yeah.
There's many things on the menu.
Next to the stovepipe that's not appropriately sealed off to prevent a fire. There's a lot of things that you can get away with. So we're back. It's been a little bit of a break, but we are here, at least for us. It's been a little bit of a break. We're here to talk about A Lie Agreed Upon, Part 2. So we'll play the music, we'll come back, and we'll break it down.
You're listening to a podcast that is a lie agreed upon. Join Wes and Clay as they discuss HBO's Deadwood and tell you something pretty.
This is A Lie Agreed Upon, Part 2, directed by Ed Bianchi, written by Jody Worth. In this one, Swearingen licks his wounds following the battle with Bullock. Doc Cochran is concerned with Al's difficulty urinating. Farnham reports that Bullock has returned to the widow Garret's hotel room. Bullock and Alma discuss their future. We leave the camp immediately or remain and sever connection, Bullock says. Maddie, Joanie Stubbs, and the whores begin transforming a raw space into the Chez Ami. Calamity Jane returns to town so inebriated that she falls from her mount and lies in the mud, one foot still tethered to her horse. Otter and Calamity Jane accompany Bullock to retrieve his badge and gun from the gem. Swearingen hands them over and utters conciliatory words. I offer you these in the hope that you'll wear them for a good long fucking time and in this fucking camp. So here we are, Clay. It's been a little bit of a while since we recorded a Deadwood episode, which unfortunately happened right in the middle of our two-parter. So we chose the wrong episodes to take a break. But as we mentioned before, this one takes place in the same night as the previous episode. So the reason that we were saying that maybe it's considered to be a two-parter is because it takes place over one day, basically.
Oh, sure.
The daytime episode was the prior one, and this is the nighttime episode where everything comes around. But what'd you think of the conclusion to A Lie Agreed Upon?
I thought it was good. I thought I feel like these episodes continue to get funnier.
Yeah.
They're really mining Swearingen in particular for comedy in this absurd comedy that they're playing with him
through his suffering with the kidney stones.
Yeah. And you only get like a little whiff of Farnham in this, but he's really funny as well.
Yeah. He says he's like, he didn't hear the song of the bedstead or something, and they just ignore him and keep looking forward. And then he's like, I got to go deal with those fucking whores, and walks out the door.
And then he's trying to conceal himself while he's spying on Joanie. And then who is it? What's the other woman's name?
It's Maddie, I think is her
Maddie.
name. Yeah.
Maddie says something about like, oh, there's some cretin, blah, blah, blah. And Joanie's like, yeah, That's the mayor.
That's the mayor. As she calls him, like some weasel-faced fuck or something out there. That's the mayor.
There's a rodent-looking creature lamping one of your barrows.
Pay him no heed. That's the mayor.
It's a really interesting episode too, because I feel like the funnier that these episodes get, the more ridiculous Bullock looks.
Yes,
because Bullock is so just down the middle, serious and over the top that every time they do something that's lighthearted and then they cut back to him just like stewing in his own bullshit, you can't help but not take him seriously.
Yeah, I think the two-parter is basically a Bullock story. In some ways, it is a condensed version of the entire first season, his arc. It's kind of repeating the same idea with him, except it's more abridged, and there is the first season didn't have his family present, right? So there wasn't like this great push for him. He was kind of just going through, trying to figure out if he wanted to run the store. He didn't want to be the sheriff. He had all these other things that he did and didn't want to do. And his discomfort with them as a character. And this one is basically over the span of a night, he kind of repeats that arc again, except things come out a little bit more, a little bit different in the wash at the end of it. But I think it's a Bullock episode that on this rewatch, me and Amy are both just kind of like impressed by how unlikable Bullock is as a person. It's unexpected, I guess. Like, I always knew this from the first few times that I've watched the show, but this time it's really obvious here. And like, I think the best way to crack into it is that like in this episode, Bullock is basically attempting to commit suicide by cop, and no one allows him to do that. And he doesn't, even down to his line when he's talking to Alma, and he has that, like, Amy got like furious at him when he has that line. He's like, "I'm not in a state where I can make a decision, so you have to make the decision for me." And it's
like, what a shithead.
Yeah, it's like he's part 50% of this relationship, but he passes everything off and just doesn't have any sort of he doesn't feel that he has a stake in anything when everyone else clearly believes that he has a stake in things. So, what'd you think about Bullock in this one?
My proposal would be we leave the camp immediately or remain in severed connection.
A choice for me to make.
Yes. I don't seek to absolve myself. I don't believe I'm to be relied upon for good judgment.
Or even for an account of your own feelings.
I only know that for us to stay and not sever connection would add line to her humiliation. Renew her humiliation daily.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, I think probably my favorite interaction with him was with Saul, because he's finally someone close to him. We get to see somebody close to him who clearly has experienced this shit from him before. Just say to him, essentially, listen, I'm sick of this. Go fuck yourself. Well, you know, he's telling him about, you know,
he's got to take the money and back his family when he runs away.
Yeah, and you know, this hypothetical about splitting the partnership, and Saul's just like, dude, fuck off. You know, I've heard this stuff from you so often. It's just getting, you know, and he's got a bullet in his arm, and he's drunk, and so he has any
he's got his load on. He's high. He enjoys calling him a cocksucker.
Right.
Cocksucker.
He's officially part of the camp now.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I really like that, because again, it does accent how ridiculous Bullock is and how his macho bluster is just so stupid.
Yeah.
And I really like that about the show too, because I think it would be really easy to play this. I mean, it is kind of a commentary, as we've talked about, on just the general Western hero, right? Because it's very easy to play this kind of character off as just the tough, silent type Western hero. Yeah. But in this one, he's the most ridiculous looking many times out of a town full of ridiculous people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's maybe that's what the comedy is kind of heightening around it. Is just that his sort of steadfast inability to laugh. Like, it's he and Charlie both don't laugh, but when Jane tells that like sort of silly story about like someone asked if they could suck her cock or something, and no one laughs, and they're just kind of sitting there. But it's no one. Everyone else is in a state of other relationships and like furthering their sort of development, and Bullock is just stuck in this moment when he can't really escape what he wants to do. I mean, I think largely the main point beyond sort of breaking down the Western righteousness of a hero is a kind of I think the main theme of the episodes is the fact that Seth is kind of growing up in the sense of realizing that his life can't be everything that he wants it to be. And on the level of the town needs him to be the sheriff that he doesn't want to be and he wants to run away from. On the personal, he has all this responsibility towards his brother's widow and his nephew that he has to take care of, and he doesn't want to do that either. And so the episodes are the setup of him kind of threatening to run away from all of it, and then being forced back by everybody else in the second episode to accept, like, to do the right thing and to realize that his happiness is not really central to everyone else around him, and that the town is only going to function if he does his job, even if it's not something he wants to do. So it's that sort of it's the story of growing up. It's like you realize that like responsibility is larger around you than it is just to yourself, and you sometimes have to sacrifice for the greater good of family or town or city or whatever you live in.
Yeah, and I think it kind of takes his black and white approach to stuff and really kind of cracks it open in a way that it kind of shows that. I think what you're talking about is correct, where he's got this certain the black and white nature of the way he views things is kind of inherently selfish.
Yeah,
and being forced in a situation where these things are now colliding, these real world things are now colliding, he has to look at the grays involved instead of just the simple answer of me mad punch face.
Right. Yep.
He's got to deal with his
or just
family
run away in this one.
Or run away.
Yeah, his thing is I either stay or I run away. Those are my two options. So it's literally like a fight or flight situation or mindset that he finds himself in.
Yeah.
He's he is fairly unlikable in this one. It's just and I guess you could. It might be too harsh in that you are supposed to feel bad for him, I think, too. Like he is growing up and realizing things, but I think it's kind of a universal thing of like everyone kind of goes through this. It just seems that Bullock is a little bit older than you would expect someone to be realizing this at this point. But it's also not his natural family, right? Like he got sort of pushed into that.
Right.
I really like the scene where he's talking to Charlie about his brother. He explains that his brother was killed in sort of like an American in the war. He was down in Mexico and died and was buried in Mexico, and Bullock had to go down there and get his body and bring it back. Mm-hmm. I think it ties in nicely to like the reason that Bullock feels so guilty about the whole thing is that his brother died trying to do something, like to be larger than himself, really, and like the noble sacrifice of his brother's death in the war. And Bullock is kind of ashamed of himself that he can't do the same in his situation for his brother. And the thing I like about the show is that we just finished our season of Picard, obviously. This entire episode, no one says to Bullock what is going. So, like me and Amy were having a discussion. I'm curious what you think. Does anyone besides Swearingen in this episode know what Bullock is thinking about? Like, does anyone have any sort of like? And I guess to clarify it, it's like I see Bullock is trying to basically commit suicide by cop in this one, and that him going back for his badge and his gun is he knows that if he goes into the gem, he will probably be killed and shot by somebody. And Swearingen's the only other character who actually voices this and says this out loud to the camera during his like blowjob monologue. He explains,
Is that going to become like something he does often? Because the first time it was like, okay, they're doing something, but this time I was like, oh, they're going back to this well already.
I don't think he does it too often after this, but it's they definitely think that now that it happened in the prior episode, they might as well continue this a little bit, but I don't think it continues too long.
That Bullock's a fucking strategist, ain't he? Sets terms to publicly humiliate me. And my penalty if I don't comply is he walks in the bar downstairs and takes 15 bullets in the chest. And that ain't no bullet, you know. Bullock, he's one of those special fucking cases. You don't know what in fuck's going on in their mind. And he's big. With Montana. Big. I heard that today. Because the news earlier from Yankton and the fucking commissioners wasn't adequately confusing. Not to mention the fucking telegraph coming in and 4 whores that I don't know who the fuck they work for. 3 minutes! Shut the fuck up!
Bullock basically wants to semi-commit suicide. He like it's his one out that he sees that he could go in there, and Swearingen says that Bullock has him in a pretty good position because he gets to be the hero by doing that. Like if he goes into the gem and is killed, he comes out as kind of the righteous one of that outcome.
Right.
And so Swearingen knows that he can't do that. That's why he goes down and gives him back the gun, and also because Yankton is interested in Bullock becoming the sheriff because they think that Bullock is the man to sort of lead the area or whatever. But what I find interesting about the script in the episode is that no one ever has a direct conversation about any of this. Like no one, even Charlie Utter, when he's talking to Bullock the entire time, never brings this up as a possibility. And it left me and Amy wondering if do you think Charlie Utter understands what Bullock is doing, or is he just sort of scared and not scared, but hesitant to go back to the gem because he knows that violence is probably going to happen? And we just think it's interesting because everyone knows that Bullock is selfish. I think Trixie calls Bullock selfish multiple times in this episode, but no one seems to recognize or call him out on what he's actually doing. And so I guess I'm just curious where you think everyone else in this show fits. Do they realize what they're doing, or is it just Swearingen and Bullock who understand what they're doing, or does Bullock even know what he's doing?
Yeah, I wasn't sure the angle that Charlie was coming from, honestly, because when he first started getting the vapors or whatever,
feeling faint.
Yeah, I thought maybe it was that he was just trying to avoid being involved with more violence, but then I was thinking, he's never been someone to do something that, for lack of a better term, cowardly. Like he's always been there for Bill, and even in the street fight, he took a shotgun blast to the face for Bullock. So I think he knows. I think because, I mean, honestly, isn't what Seth is doing kind of a different version of what Bill did? Yeah, to some extent.
Yeah.
And I think what Charlie does is he essentially just kind of tries to distract him long enough to let his temper come down, which is why I think he reacts kind of weird when Jane shows up, because Jane showing up, she's just like, well, let's go over and shoot the motherfucker. You know? Like she brings it all right back, and Charlie's like, oh, Jesus Christ. So I have to imagine that Charlie understands what is, if not directly what's going on with Seth. I think he sees the signs enough to know that Seth really should at the very least like sleep on this.
Yeah, just cool down. Think of sleep on it. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's probably correct. It is like, and that's what's so. I think that's the subtlety of the show, because when Charlie first starts pretending, I'm assuming they don't even acknowledge that he is pretending at any point. Right. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult to understand.
Yeah. On another show, at the end of the episode, after he gets his gun back, like as they're walking away, Seth would make a crack, being like, "Oh, looks like you're a lot better now."
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, well, I just walked around a bit, and
yes,
it's funny. It's funny how the nighttime air helps a man."
Yeah, no, it's true. It's I like the mystique of it. It's like it's weird because I don't find it. I guess I don't consider it to be mystique because I have a fairly clear idea of what I think is going on in the show, but the show refuses to take a moment where it spoon feeds the audience what exactly these characters are thinking at any point. And I appreciate that about it. I think that it on people's first watch through, it probably makes the show seem confusing in a lot of ways, where there is a kind of lack of clarity coupled with the way that the characters speak to each other. It becomes incredibly difficult to understand motivations sometimes. But I think in hindsight, especially having seen it a few times, I would agree with you about Charlie, for instance. Like, I think that he's not scared of anything, but he is recognizing that Seth and Bill are kind of cut from the same cloth and that he needs to de-escalate the situation before things get worse. I don't think that he knows that Bullock is going in with sort of suicidal. Like, would you agree with me that Bullock seems semi-suicidal in this? Like, what he's choosing to do?
It wasn't my first thought, but now that you were talking about it, I can see that being a motivation. Yeah, I can see that because I think regardless of whether or not he is actively suicidal, I think the thing that all of the other characters are kind of pulling from his actions here are, why are you doing this? Like, what other outcome could there be but to start more violence, and why do you want to do that? Nobody says that to him directly, but I feel like that's the reaction that most people are getting from this. Yeah. And whether or not they believe that he's doing it specifically to get killed or what, I don't know. So I don't know. I think it's tough to say, because I mean, he has to know that if he goes in there to start some shit, there's what's the line? I mean, it's the thing that Al says, right, when he says something about there's 15 guns that would fill him full of lead as soon as he, I forget what the exact line is. But.
Yeah, that's the thing that makes me most feel that that's the case is because Swearingen serves as Bullock's sort of other half, really, in the show, and like very strongly in these episodes where they are at loggerheads with each other. But Swearingen has a line where, during his blowjob monologue, his basic line is that he's upset that Bullock has him somewhat cornered here because he can't. No matter what the outcome is, Swearingen is going to come out looking like the dishonorable one of this take. Right. So Bullock going in and dying through the sort of suicide by cop thing, where he goes into the gym to try to get his gun and badge back and is killed by Dan Dority or something. Bullock is doing that because, my opinion is that Bullock is doing that because he knows he can no longer run away at the end of the story, but he also does not really want to stay in the situation. So his out is to be a sort of suicide by cop thing where he goes in and everyone sort of thinks that he's doing the righteous, honorable thing and is shot down in his prime, basically. And that's what I always read it as. And that's why he's sort of like, when Swearingen comes out and just talks to him, he's kind of flummoxed. He doesn't know what to say about anything. He has this sort of strange, like, peculiar look on his face when Swearingen is like, "Do you want your hat back?" and stuff like that. And he gives him back. So he's stumped at that point, and then he gets to go home after that. But that's my take on Bullock, is that the reason he decides to go back is not for any sort of like honorable thing of like showing William, his stepson, that he is to do and get the gun and stuff like that. It's to attempt to save face and escape the situation at the same time.
It's like that old Bill Burr bit where he talks about how he only thinks about suicide when he has to do something really trivial.
Yeah.
Like he remembered he had to bake a pie for a holiday, and he's like, why don't I just throw myself out the window? Get out of baking this pie.
That was always the I forget who else had said this, but I always thought it was a really good point, where there's always like, there's always these stories with either celebrity or someone famous, right, where they'll do like a deep dive on them, and they'll be like, I was suicidal at a certain point. It's like I just used to have days where I would think about just offing myself and stuff like that. And the person made the point, like, depending on how you're interpreting this, like, most people kind of have suicidal thoughts at times. You know, you're not that you're serious, but like their example is always like if you go to the edge of a cliff and you're like, what if I just jumped off this thing? You know, like that would be a hell of a thing. It's that the suicidal thoughts. I guess for the amount of people having suicidal thoughts, it makes me just wonder about like what is the timbre of your suicidal thoughts, I guess. Like, are you actually thinking about it, or are you just like, what would this world be like if I weren't here, in a sort of less serious way or whatever? Bullock he gets his gun back. He's back with no bundling board in between the bed and a gun at the very end.
I did have to look up what that was.
Just a separating board, right, that keeps two people. Yeah.
More or less what I thought it was.
Yeah. I don't know why they call it a bundling board. It doesn't bundle at all, does it?
No, it's just a piece of wood. It's like a headboard that extends down the length of the long length of the bed.
Yeah, keep people on their sides.
Yeah, the thing I was reading said it was meant for couples who were in the midst of courting, so they could share a bed. Yeah. And remain decent and keep their clothes on, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
Yeah, I guess sometimes it works and sometimes it didn't. I guess the original title of the Beach Boys, "Wouldn't It Be Nice," was the bundling board. That would make sense. Anything else here for these crew? I mean, Jane came back. Swearingen continues. I guess Swearingen getting sicker is the more the Swearingen crew is probably the other place to go with this. Al continues to get worse. I think it's kidney stones. Is there another kind of stone besides kidney stones that you can get?
You can get gallstones.
Gallstones. Are those not the same thing?
I actually have no idea. If it's a peeing thing, I assume it's kidney stone. I thought it was like a prostate thing.
No, he's got stones. Yeah.
Oh, which I assume that was why she was putting the thumb up his ass, because it was a prostate thing.
Well, so the doc calls them gleets, I think, which are the little crystals that come out. He has passed any.
How's Bullock doing? I don't discuss my patients one with another. Bleeding through his fucking ear is bleeding through it pretty fucking good out there in the thoroughfare. Tell me about that other department. Inform that fucking lunatic. Next you see him, I'm fit as a fucking fiddle and ready to play on.
Inform me, Al, to what mark in your piss pot did you fill?
The volume was adequate. I didn't check the mark.
Any discharge of gleets, burning, or soreness?
Have you ever had a kidney stone?
No. Have you?
No, I have not. Thankfully, everyone I know who has them, it sounds like the most excruciating thing they've ever experienced.
Yeah, I've had an uncle who had one, and the painful ones are the ones that I've never known anyone who's gone in for surgery to fix it. They usually just like piss them out, and that's the end of it, which sounds like its own kind of special hell. But I guess I was reading something that was unrelated to this, but like back in this era, in the colonial era, do you know the Journal of Samuel Pepys? I think his name is pronounced. Do you know that sort of journal?
I do not. Is it like a manifesto of a serial killer?
No, it's famous for being like a man named Samuel Pepys lived in colonial America, and he was famous because he kept a very detailed diary on himself, and it's largely been intact and recovered, but it's famous because it's not particularly like it's really just a day in the life of this guy every single day.
Dear Constance, oh, this sucks so much.
But
why did I ever leave jolly old England?
He has sort of funny stories about like he like there's just weird samples like his like basement flooded with or something like that. And he has these funny little tales about like living in colonial America. But one of the things that's when
we came here, no one bothered to figure out where we would put all the human shit, and it's just everywhere.
He has some story about stepping into. He says turds, which I thought was funny. I didn't know turds were a word, but he says he stepped into a big pile of human turd. This is why we fought for freedom from Britain. But he had one of the things that's famous about him is that he had I think I got this from the Bill Bryson book. He suffered from a stone at some point in his life. And the experience of getting it out, it was like it was one that he had to have surgery on, which is basically they hold your legs behind your head with no anesthesia and cut like your taint open, basically, and they have to fish around with like pliers to pull out what basically comes out like a ping pong ball sized rock out of you. And it apparently, Bryson was funny writing about it, just saying that like the experience so traumatized him that like numerous entries in his diary talk about the time that he had the kidney stone taken out. And I think that's what Al has. I think Al has that version. So the issue is that you have to get it out of you before it gets to the size where that's the operation that has to be done.
Oy, yeah. Honestly, that's the thing. I praise the Creator every day that I was not born in the 1800s or before, because like it's minor inconveniences. Those are the things that would drive me to want to jump off a cliff.
It's like probably a pill you can take.
How did anybody? If I grew up, I had a lot of ear infections when I was a kid.
Yep,
that's something that I would want to jump in front of a moving buffalo or something.
Yeah, tooth pain.
Tooth pain. Yeah, like or imagine having bad eyesight. Yeah. Like people with Coke bottle glasses. What did they do? Did they just go through life unable to see anything? Is that just like it? Just their whole life was just like a foggy night.
Yeah. Well, not to keep going back, but I mean, Star Trek Picard clearly tells us, Clay, that 2023 is the worst year to be a human being alive.
Of course, yes. You can see the fire by the Hollywood sign. What more do you need?
No, but I had
speaks for itself.
I had the 2 back surgeries. I would just be hobbled.
Yeah,
like at 30 years old, I'd just be hobbled in my bed for the rest of my life.
Yeah, they would have shot you like a horse.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would have been begging for it probably just to get out of that. But I mean, that's like that's largely the average death age. It's not that people were just dying at 40 years old. It's because so many people were dying because of some horrible, annoying kidney stone problem.
Mean, that's the other thing too. I would have died in some war probably by this point, or some farming accident or something.
Yeah. People with like just tons of kids, and only like kids each have like a 50% chance of surviving, and it's just like you just have tons of kids and a lot of them don't survive.
The generational trauma that must have been suffered by just multiple generations of people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we do have it lucky. You probably have a pill to dissolve your kidney stones, your kids.
I don't even want to go back. I don't even want to go back before the invention of toilet paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's like what? 45 years ago?
Yeah. World War II? Did they have shipments of toilet paper in World War II? I don't actually know. I'm not sure. 1876 or 77 when this takes place. I don't think they don't have toilet paper.
What's the first publication of the Sears catalog? That's when toilet paper was invented.
You just tell them to seal up the ass flap. So yeah, Al and his crew, we get probably the most interesting thing is the continuation of Dan Dority and Silas Adams. Their sort of disagreements with each other, and this one results in Dan sort of beating the shit out of Silas's good buddy, and Silas has to kill Slippery Dan by jamming him against the deer. Poor
Slippery Dan. Yeah, man, yeah. I do love this show in how if it doesn't know what to do with characters, it is not above just wiping the slate clean.
What was the other Dan? Was his other other Dan died in the first episode, right? The one in the bar.
Yeah, it was another adjective Dan.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, but Slippery Dan served his purpose and then just had to go and I just it's the funniness of the scripts too. Like after Adams kills him by jamming him into the deer antlers, there's a running gag of people being like, "I would have killed that guy by jamming him on the antlers 1,000 times."
I thought that was so amazing and hilarious that when Dan has his crisis of confidence and Al goes to talk to him, the way that he gets him back is he's like, "Did you see how that guy only stabbed him through 2 of those antlers? I know that if either you or I had been involved, we would have stabbed him through like 7 or 8, possibly 10 antlers." And Dan's like, "You're right. You know what? You're right. We would have. Yep. And then that's the thing that he's later on. He's like, if I had done that, we would have been through 10 antlers.
He tells somebody else the same thing. That's kind of a common Swearingen underling thing is they repeat what Swearingen says to them to somebody else. Yeah, which is funny. Yeah.
Imagine being lactose intolerant back then. I'm just thinking about all the like the common things that would just be like excruciating because everything was like milk and cheese and shit.
Yep.
Literally, if you're lactose intolerant.
Yes. Those are your three options of what you can do. No, you'd have toothache, you'd have ear infection. I guess infections would just get better over time. They must, right? You just have to it just has to get through it on the course of things. But
I got pneumonia a lot too when I was a kid. I would have been dead before I reached like 10.
Yes. Yeah.
And then once I reached 11, I'd be of fighting age and I would have died in the war between the states.
Yeah. Then you can get married at 12. Everything's ready to go. You have a farm. You have 10 kids, and then you pass away at 16. That's the end of it for you.
Drinking problem by 11.
I mean, that's why it's probably the importance of alcohol, right? Just have to like salve that kind of horrible lifetime. Yeah, it's not a particularly pleasant place to be. Just this quote I thought was interesting from Swearingen when he's talking to Dan, who's having his confidence issues. Whatever looks ahead of grievous abominations and disorder, you and me walk into it together like always. So there is a... did you see any duplicity there? Or is Swearingen being truthful when he's talking to Dan about Adams?
Yeah, I think so. He still needs to kind of go over the top because clearly Dan needs the reassurance, and I think it's going to take more than just being like, hey, buddy, you're my number one guy.
Yeah.
And so he lays it on a little thick. But so I think I get the sense that that he's legitimate when he talks to Dan.
Yes. Yeah. They've been through a lot. We've learned through exposition. I do like that. I like the sort of interactions between Silas, Dan, and Swearingen. I think that's interesting. It's nice that they do have a little bit of conflict between that group all the time. The show always does the building to a fight. Interestingly, too, just where Dan goes over and is like cleaning the table vigorously. The guy's like, I think you cleaned it, boss. He's like, the fuck did you say to me?
I think I got her clean there, Hoss.
Another fucking clever one. I bet when you and your partner's out on the trail, when you ain't greasing poles and choosing who's gonna be rider, I bet you and him just bust each other's guts with your little fucking funnies.
Well, we do laugh some about you.
Let's hear a belly giggle now, you cocksucker.
That was what was great about the Old West is all it took was a slight
table cleaning.
A slight, if you will, and it could people could come to blows and shoot each other. Yeah, microaggression. It did. That scene did have one of my favorite lines so far when Al is talking to Silas, and he says, "Over time, your quickness with a cocky rejoinder must have gotten you many punches to the face."
Depends what you mean by many. There you go. We did it again. Yeah, your cocky rejoinder. Was the whole that's probably plot-wise that's the most confusing section to me that I'm not sure I could even explain right now why Yankton prefers Bullock over.
Yeah, I wasn't really tracking that stuff.
No, I don't even know if the show is justifying it all that well. It just it has to be a reason. Swearingen needs a reason for the larger purpose why Bullock has to maintain his position.
It was something along the lines of like Bullock is from Montana, or they perceive him to be from Montana, and the people in charge in Montana have like deeper pockets or some shit.
Yes,
it's something like that where he's like the hometown boy up there. So any dealings, he's important to any dealings.
Yeah, it's kind of mob-esque. Yeah. He's like a made man just because he's from the wealthier area and probably has connections and stuff like that. Yeah, but they haven't. At this point, no one from the government or no one else has really come into the camp yet. They're mostly they're still just kind of talking about the fact that people are trying to line their pockets with what's coming. The next episode will feature a little bit more of an intrusion as we're introduced to other characters. Swearingen continues to get sick. I think I cut you off. Any thoughts about Swearingen continuing to get sick?
No, I just think it's very funny. Like even the way that he, I feel like McShane very consciously is keeping his one good eye open extra wide when he's got the other one is like swollen shut.
Yeah,
it creates a very humorous look.
Yep.
And man, I was laughing very hard when he's trying to get her to pull her thumb out of his ass.
Yeah.
And then he's like, what part of me running away from you told you that you should push deeper?
Sorry. Did you want me to suck your prick? Please. Yeah. It's I think McShane is doing I really feel for Al's pain through his performance. It's a visceral sense of this guy's just fucked up. Like he has both the kidney stone and he's clearly injured from the fight with Bullock. And the way he's hobbling around, the way his face looks, the makeup is really good and everything like that. It's a terrific performance about just like how disheveled this guy is. And the scenes where people are talking to him are all very funny.
And I love it. I love him. You get a little bit of that exasperation from him when people are trying to what's the word I'm looking for? People are trying to
kiss ass.
Empathize with his pain.
Oh,
like
sure.
what's his name? The guy with the bowler hat.
Tom Nuttall. The other bartender.
Nuttall,
yeah.
Who says? I think it's him who says, even when Jesus was up there on the cross, I always thought the thing that hurt him the most was the rib pain.
Because Al's ribs are sore. Yeah.
But and then he's got this other weird thing where it's such a strange detail, but is it Johnny?
Johnny
the guy with
Burns
the king? Yeah, Johnny brings his suit back, but his suit stinks. I wasn't tracking what that was, other than just it's another indignity on top of everything else that his suit smells like shit.
Yeah, he brought it
whatever
to
it was, they cleaned it.
Yeah, brought it to Woo for I think primitive dry cleaning, and so whatever oil or powder he used is causing it to stink. Yeah. It's nice that he gets his suit cleaned, though.
Yeah, Bullock's still traipsing around the same shit-covered suit from earlier in the day.
Oh, I guess that's why he got it cleaned, right? Because it was all beat up. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess that's the time I was forgetting how quick this has been over the course of the day, or in the course of the day in terms of the show. Yeah, I think McShane is terrific in this sort of injury role. They're sort of weakening him bit by bit. He has some good moments. Still gets to have great dialogue with characters. I like his stuff with Tom Nuttall. I think that conversation is very funny. His confrontation with Bullock at the end is funny. Jane curses him out a few times and he doesn't react to her really, which is a nice touch. Just they tend to be quite nice. So what do you think of? You get a little bit of Alma in this one. It's mostly her looking out the window, talking to that babysitter she has, or the teacher, Miss Isernhausen. Anything to say about Alma in this one?
I was trying to track what was going on there too. Was Sarah Paulson spreading rumors or something? Because they cut back to her telling Alma something that sounded like she was talking shit about Bullock, but it was unconfirmed stuff about what his plans were, which is what causes Alma to kind of respond to be like, I'm not going to leave here and leave this guy. I wasn't totally tracking exactly what was
Sophia
going on there.
thing. Is that what you mean? So she had heard that they were going to run away and leave Sophia. I think, if I'm remembering right, they sort of cut into that scene in a way that you don't know what they've been talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what caught me off guard, because it's right in the middle of the conversation. And it sounds like Sarah Paulson is talking about something she heard.
Yes, it's either that or she's giving hypotheticals to Alma about what might be the outcome. And one of the outcomes might be that if she and Bullock leave, Sophia has to stay behind in the town.
Ah, okay.
And whether and that's sort of like I always just interpret it as it's the cracks in Alma at that point where she's kind of realizing the downside to some of the things that she's considering at this point. Alma's storyline is not really resolved here yet because Bullock doesn't talk to her at the end of the night. He just goes home instead.
Yeah. I just couldn't tell if she was doing it like if she had an ulterior motive or something, you know?
Yeah, that's not the sense I get at this point. Yeah. I think it's just she's kind of giving her they had to have some character who would question what Alma is thinking. Anyone else there? Doc and Jane, they just have sort of minor scenes with each other. Oh, Chez Ami, too, is a thing that happens.
Whose brain was he digging into?
I think that's the Reverend.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that was another thing. Was he, at the end, was Swearingen talking about the Reverend that we've been watching on the show as being killed by the heathens on the side of the road?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's very unceremonious end to that character.
Well, but he's doing it just as a cover. They're blaming the Indians for Swearingen killing him.
Oh, right. Because as he was telling that story, I was like, I don't think that's what happened to him. So I couldn't remember what the hell happened to him.
Yeah. So in the show, Swearingen he smothers him.
Yeah. Right.
In real life, Reverend Smith was found the way that Swearingen describes. So
really?
Yeah, he was found dead on the side of the road, and they think that Native Americans had killed him. And so I think it's just a clever use of the show, tying together history and saying that we dumped his body by the side of the road so that no one was the wiser.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I'm pretty sure that Doc is digging around because that would make sense why it's the brain because of the seizures that he's having. Yeah, but you don't see his face.
They didn't want to do the Deadwood special where they pay for him to show up for 8 hours to pretend to be a dead body.
They can have Ricky Jay drop the body off and just walk out the door and say no lines of dialogue. We only get a little bit of Cy in this one. He basically tries to motivate his employees in the worst meeting of all time.
when they started that scene and they just had the camera on him while he was going off, I was like, if there's someone sucking his dick, this show really is starting to turn into a parody of itself.
General principle. I believe in fostering people's tries at improving themselves. And I think you all also know that I got a special fondness for Joanie Stubbs. And if those things wasn't true, in this camp, at this precise juncture, our Cy Tolliver would not have backed an exclusively high-end whoring operation at the far fucking end of the camp without concealed access for its trade. But be that as it may, and wishing Joanie Godspeed, this congregation gathers so that I can assure each of you that our operation here in the Bella Union is organized exactly to capitalize on what this camp is ready for and for what it's going to become.
I always misremembered that, thinking he's talking to nobody because of the way he's talking.
Oh, sure.
No one's responding to anything, but he's just ranting for a little bit. But he's upset because Joanie and Maddie have set up the Chez Ami on the other side of town, which is the kind of joint where $2 worth of labor does not get you a blowjob. So it's for the upper echelon of it gives you a whiff of pussy though, which is
that was really funny.
Which is apparently an item on the menu. But yeah, they're just trying to tidy that place up, and they have their own place now, but it's not quite operational.
I'm wondering who they think are going to be paying those prices.
That's what Amy said. She said, who's this place serving at this point?
Right. It's like every time it's like, you know how you go through like one town and there's always like a Lamborghini dealership and you're like, who's buying these cars?
Yeah.
In between, you've got a Lamborghini dealership in between a Walmart and like a chain restaurant in a town that's basically built off of a highway. Who's buying these cars?
I had a weird semi-related thing like that. So we went down to the Outer Banks of North Carolina recently. We drove down from Massachusetts, and when you go into northern Delaware and you get past Philadelphia, you can kind of go down that little Chesapeake Peninsula or whatever that thing is called that will get you to the bridge that brings you to Virginia and then into North Carolina. And that whole stretch is just like it's like a state, like the major thoroughfare is like a state road. It's like a 2-lane road that's driving through like just farmland and strip malls and stuff like that. It's just like a straight shot and the kind of thing that you fall asleep after 10 minutes of driving. And, you're going past all the strip malls. You're going past like a billion Tractor Supply stores. You go past all this other stuff. And as we're going past it, in the middle of nowhere, there's no other major cities, we drove past an Enterprise rent-a-car place. And I was just like, who is this serving out here?
Right.
Like normally a rent-a-car is near like an airport or something, like where there's a reason that you need to rent a car to get around. But
how do you get to this Enterprise?
Right, exactly. How do you get there? Like, do you have to take an Uber from Philadelphia for 100 miles to get there? It was bizarre.
Yeah, that's anytime I go to New Hampshire, anytime we drive into New Hampshire, there's always, you're driving through the mountains going to North Conway or something, and just out of nowhere on the side of the road, there's like a tile flooring place.
Yes, yeah.
And it's like, who's okay? I mean, I guess
has to be one.
I guess it's got to be. You got to put it somewhere, I guess. But it's always strange to me to see businesses that are just lone buildings sticking out of.
It's not a grocery store.
Wilderness.
It's a very niche product. Yeah. And we always do the same. I don't know if you guys do the same with We just have sort of a running joke with me and Amy, like on road trips or where you're driving through some place and you see a house and you're just like, who lives there?
Yes,
like
every time. Every time I drive through New Hampshire, I'm like, who's living in these houses? What are they doing? Where are they going?
You feel like the government should be keeping tabs on these people. Like there's no reason, just like you'll be up in New Hampshire, driving into Western Mass. It's like you're on a state highway road at night, and it's just like a mile of nothing, and then there's a solitary ranch house with no lights on and a car in the driveway, and you're like, what the fuck is going on
it's
in there?
It's like you've just driven into In Cold Blood.
Yeah. And you keep your eye on the house in the rear view as you drive around the bend, and you're like, the last thing I need is a bunch of cannibals running out of that thing and chasing the car down. Yeah. Terrifying, but who lives there? Anything else about this episode? A lie agreed upon. So I guess the title is a good place to go with. The final thought would be the theme. One of the themes of the show is the idea of lies agreed upon, and we've talked about that. I think Napoleon is attributed to the quote is attributed to Napoleon that history is a lie agreed upon by the winners, or something like that. So the idea that stories are kind of made up, and we as a society or a culture kind of agree to them. One of the examples here is marriage in this episode. The idea that you have control over your life, I guess, would be another one that's a lie agreed upon. I don't know if you have any of the others, but I really like that concept of cultural analysis, I guess it is, which is just that there's sort of things that we all know are kind of like money is a good example. Money's a lie.
Right.
Money doesn't really exist, but the reason that it exists is because we all agree that it means something. But the piece of paper you're holding in your hand does not actually have any legitimate value to it. It's just kind of the agreement in society. So I just like the idea.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize all of a sudden we're at a kegger in college. That one guy being like, man, money isn't even real. Did you realize that? It's just paper. It only exists. It only exists. It's only worth something because we believe it to be.
How could there have been in the Great Depression running out of money? This is like the modern monetary theory. Like how saying you ran out of money is the equivalent of saying like you ran out of like breaths or something like that. Like that, there's a sort of funniness to it that it's like, how could you not make more of it? Obviously, there's complicated economics.
How come during the Great Depression, if it was happening in the entire world, how come they didn't just go, guys, we're done with money for now.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore. Let's figure something else out and let's get this shit rolling again.
That's all this is just shitty economics, but like that's always the funny point about like debt, right? Like how can you owe so much debt to people.
Right.
Like how can dead exist? And obviously it does, but dead is also just another one of those lies agreed upon. But did you see any other examples of such a thing in this one, or what do you think the main thing is that everyone is? What is the thing that doesn't actually matter but does matter to the town?
Thing that doesn't actually matter that does matter to the town.
Is it Bullock? Is it the idea that they are building something? Is it the marriage of Bullock? Is it?
Yeah, I think generally there's the sense that they have their eyes towards a legitimacy that feels like it's all. It feels like something that's never going to happen. You know, it's the way all of these, anytime they all get together and have their sort of discussions about what they're going to do to bring the town into the next century or whatever, and so they don't get rolled away. It always feels like when a bunch of friends get together and say, let's start a business. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'll come over, we'll hang out for a little bit and we'll talk some bullshit and then never talk about this ever again. But like I really liked the scene with Al and Merrick, where Merrick wants to know what was going on, and Al gives him a very sanitized version, or there's some line about decency, but then he cleans everything up and basically gives him a sanitized PR spun version of what was going on that kind of felt like it was very of the theme.
That's the closeout to the episode, is Al writing, dictating the newspaper article to Merrick.
Yeah.
Tonight, throughout Deadwood, heads may be laid to pillow, assuaged and reassured, for that purveyor for profit of everything sordid and vicious, Al Swearingen, already beaten to a fare-thee-well earlier in the day by Sheriff Bullock, has returned to the sheriff the implements and ornaments of his office. Without the tawdry walls of Swearingen's saloon, the Gem, decent citizens may pursue with a new and jaunty freedom all aspects of Christian commerce. In which connection we particularly recommend, and there you throw in the names of a few businesses, gave you good size adverts.
Yeah, that's an example of it too. I guess it continues Milch's sort of like antagonistic approach towards journalism, where Swearingen's monologue ends with like, and thanks to the kind support of the following, and he's like, and then list your three major, like the three companies that gave you the most ad space or something like that. And journalism, I guess, would be the same thing of a lie agreed upon in that sense. But yeah, that's the closing monologue, and then Al is going to bed. I assume Merrick tucks him in. That would be the polite thing to do, but we don't get to see that.
Who was Trixie going to shoot?
At the very end when there's the standoff? Yeah.
Yeah, because she keeps talking shit, I assume, about Bullock.
Yes.
So does she have her gun on, because we never see from her point of view.
No, you see her walk towards the camera. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know if she's got the gun trained on him or if it's trained on Al or what.
I would guess at this point it's Al, I think. Although she definitely doesn't like Bullock at all. Maybe that would be because she doesn't interact with Al in these two scenes, right? She's been with Saul the entire time, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't had a sense. But she gives Saul the little 6-shooter because it won't knock him out with the pain of having to fire the gun. So that's it. That's it for the two-parter. Deadwood's only two-parter, Clay. So we're over with these. The rest of them are standalone episodes in the episodic sense. Any final thoughts about A Lie Agreed Upon parts 1 and 2, or just part 2, if you'd like?
No, it was good. The show continues to be good. This one, I think they do a good job balancing the density of the language with just clear scenes where you don't necessarily need to understand exactly all that they're saying in order to get what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's a credit to the writing and especially to the actors for pulling it all off as well as they do.
Yeah. Yeah, they
A lot of farting in this episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of farting. I like Cochran's. He's like, Jane, the allure of the female breast left me long ago. Take off your goddamn house.
My favorite one was when Charlie, apropos of nothing, gets up and he goes, "Yeah, of course I move over here if I'm going to pass wind. It's only the polite thing to do." And Seth is like, "What the fuck?"
And Charlie hollers back something. He's like, "And don't ever tell anyone I wasn't a gentleman."
Yeah. My guts is all a mess right now.
My guts are in upheaval, I think he says. Yeah.
That would be if you were lactose intolerant. That would be every day.
He just doesn't know. He just can't eat cheese all day.
I love that the episode ends with Seth placing a loaded gun next to his sleeping son.
He wants him to know. He went back and got those weapons. What do you think of Seth's house that he built?
Nice house.
Yeah, nice.
From what I could see, it looks real nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I was surprised he went with the wraparound staircase. Really, that seems like a complicated architectural design, but he went for it.
I was surprised to see the off-center entryway because when he kind of goes around the corner on the porch and enters that way.
Oh, it has like a mud room. You mean? Yeah, it has like that outer room. I guess that makes sense. More houses probably did have that because you get like shit all over your feet.
Yeah, there's
stuff like
that. A lot of shit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's it. We'll catch up with the rest of the Deadwood crew in the next episode, which is called New Money. We introduced to a new character in New Money. But that's
new character, old face.
That's right, new character, old face. So,
I'm really looking forward to talking about that because I can't believe that they did that. But
yeah, there's a lot of production.
You can't do
notes
that
about
anymore.
It. No, you can't do that anymore. It's I do remember I did not notice it the first time I watched the show.
Yeah.
The performance is astoundingly different from what we're used to.
Like, given the way that all of the TV shows, excuse me, nowadays are so every word, it's such a result of like the mystery box storytelling and spoiler culture that every show that is a non-episodic, a serialized show, every single movement, action, word spoken, and character who shows up on screen has a definitive existence that must mean something in the universe.
Yeah.
And so it's like, this is like if Sean Bean just showed up in the third season of Game of Thrones playing a completely different character with no connection to Ned Stark, and nobody ever brought it up.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it would be.
People who drive people insane.
It's funny though, because in those kind of, not that Game of Thrones is a mystery box, but in like the more mystery boxy shows, it's funny that would be egregious when a lot of the stuff in mystery box shows tends to not amount to anything, but people forget about it, I guess. But an actor's face is probably something more visceral, and you sort of remember it or whatever it is.
I feel like the closest to something like this is when they, remember in WandaVision, where they had the guy, the kid from the X-Men who played Quicksilver, playing Quicksilver, and everybody was losing their fucking minds, and it was just like, nah, we thought it would be a fun joke.
When making a joke goes wrong in the writers' room of LA. Are we going to have our TV writer's strike?
No, I don't know.
It's in the news.
I think it's supposed to happen the next day or so, I think.
The last writer's strike we had was a couple of years ago, right? It was like a decade ago, maybe.
I read a really interesting thread talking about what happens when the writers strike. It was framed in the production and release of the James Bond movie Quantum of Solace.
Yeah.
And it was pretty interesting because that movie is famously terrible in a very oddly specific way. And I guess that was one where they were going into production as the writer's strike started, so they couldn't make any changes to the script. So like Daniel Craig and the director were just making stuff up on the day. And there's a quote from Daniel Craig where he's like, yeah, I'm an actor, but I am not a writer, I discovered as we were making this movie.
Certainly not on the fly, I don't think. Yeah, it's a a lot of weird rules about like they're allowed to shoot, but they just can't edit any of the scripts or anything like that. Like,
right? Yeah.
It's a strange place.
That happened to the second X-Files movie. I think was one of those too, where which is wild to me because it really makes you wonder how much really like it must be incredibly common to just change whole sections of the script if you're going in. I mean, I guess it's if you're hustling to get something you think you can shoot by the strike deadline that isn't necessarily possibly finished and or good.
Yep.
Maybe like a first draft or something.
Yeah.
But it's always wild when it's like, yeah, that was a writer's strike movie. It's like, well, you still had the script and you still made the movie.
Yes.
So what were you going to do otherwise?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
If there wasn't a script, were you just going to rewrite it on the fly as you were making the movie? Is that how this works?
Chat GPT it now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Writers aren't counting on the studios having that in their back pocket this time.
No, the writers were late on streaming royalties, and then they were late on ChatGPT, whatever that's going to do for draft generation and stuff like that. That's it. We're done. It's a lie agreed upon. The next episode is New Money. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You can support the show at patreon.com/thepensky-file. Someone on Patreon actually said that they signed up just because of this show, so maybe people are listening to this show. Yeah,
we got one.
We got one. We're done. Thanks very much. We will not finish this podcast.
Well, you know, Wes, if this we can just reach one person with this show, it will have been all worth it.
It will, yeah. So thank you, person.
Mission accomplished.
Thank you, person on Patreon, and thank you for possibly your $30 to $60 by the time this is all said and done. Hopefully you stick around after that. You can check out all the other shows while you're on there. You can check out all the Star Trek podcasts. You can check out the Rotten Horror Picture Show. You can check out Badass.
I think this person should we tell them that all of our shows that are not Star Trek based tend to end abruptly before they're finished?
Well, this one has the end in sight. I can see the ending episode. Some of the other ones, no.
That's what I thought about The Prisoner, and then my hard drive crashed.
That's true. The final Prisoner episode will never be heard by anybody, unfortunately. Yeah. Well, we watched the remake on that one. So you can watch the original one, and then you can watch the remake. Or listen to the podcast. Yeah.
Speaks for itself, though, doesn't it? That we didn't bother to go back and finish it.
Well, that was like, with Moore's Law, that was like a totally different internet world back then. Like maybe
That's
nowadays
true,
it would be savable or something, but I was recording on like a Blue Yeti in the middle of a table, and that was the extent of it. So I guess we'll go out with a final Deadwood thing here. Let me see if I can come up with a question for you off the top of my head. Does Deadwood have anything unique to it that you think is unique to itself as a show that it doesn't really share with any other kind of show? It doesn't have to be anything major, just something that the show does particularly well or particularly not well or uniquely compared to other TV.
I do think the dialogue in this show is in and of its like on its own level. Like there's something about the way that these scripts are written, and they are written in a old-fashioned kind of dialect, but it doesn't feel pretentious to me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like they're really trying, but it's just there's, as we've talked about many times, there's a density to what they're saying that if you really listen, and a lot of times you do have to really listen to what you're saying, they give you everything, but there is just this sort of like almost like a translation barrier that you have to get through sometimes to really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And I can't really think of another show that's done that.
Yeah. It's funny because while watching this episode, I was thinking that during one of the Alma scenes, because Alma speaks more proper compared to the other characters because she's a educated woman from the East Coast and stuff like that. But I was wondering, like, because I agree with you, but while Alma was speaking, for some reason it popped into my mind of like, I wonder if people find this show to be pretentious.
Yeah, I was thinking that specifically in this episode as well.
Yeah,
maybe
for
it was in
anything
the
specific?
same scene. I think it was just there maybe was one. You know what it was? I think it was in the Tom Nettle scene where he's talking to Al, and he uses a word like perspicacity or something like that, like some big archaic word that no one in the 20th or 21st century ever throws off in general conversation. And that was the first time where I was like, okay, that feels a little bit like they're reaching.
Yep.
But generally I don't feel that.
Because what is the... it's one of the greatest lines of Deadwood comes up in a future episode, but it's also Tom Nuttall. So I think Nuttall is just kind of a character who talks this way. But yeah, it's because I think that this line sums up the difference. Tom Nuttall has a quote. He says, "My bicycle masters boardwalk and quagmire with aplomb." which is it's a very funny thing for him to say in the context, which we'll get to. But it's also it's dangerously close to being pretentious. But it's like it's such a silly thing to say that it's not pretentious at the same time somehow.
Yeah. And there's always the people who talk like that the most tend to be the real shit kickers.
Yeah.
And so there's something about that as well, where it's like you've got EB coming in and saying like, well, I believe thee nay that we should go. And it just, there's the fact that it's these guys who are kind of dumbasses.
Yep.
Putting on airs of intelligence and respectability, which I think kind of evens it out.
Yeah.
Because like if they were talking like that if this was the importance of being earnest or something, it would feel a lot less there'd be a lot less forgiving, I think.
Yeah. No, I adore Milch's dialogue. I think he has had a sort of certain ear for things like this and writes in a very musical way with the way the characters say things and the way that the choices for words that they use and stuff like that. There's a way he not disguises, but dresses up what they're talking about. I always think about Swearingen when in that scene in the first season where he's talking to Wild Bill and he says that like, I didn't get to this place thinking about the right and wrong of things. I just find it to be a really clever. It's not even clever. I just find it to be a really like interesting line to have Swearingen say that.
It's more. The dialogue is just more. I know I don't want to discount all the hard work that people do in these shows because it's very difficult and a lot of them are very good. But it feels like the dialogue in the show is more considered than your average show.
Yeah, just
because they so rarely are talking about something directly without it having multiple meanings.
Yes, yeah.
That it just has a different tenor to it. And it doesn't ring false because as we were discussing here, the conversations that they have, you can kind of choose your own. It's almost like you are actually watching these people have real conversations because you don't necessarily know exactly what their motivations are underneath the words that they're saying to each other.
Right. Yeah.
And that's incredibly hard to do because it's, having Al, I think is the best at it because so much of what he does and says is very reactionary to other stuff that's happening. And so you can kind of see where the road is taking him, where it's like in one scene, he's mad about there being a warrant out for his arrest for murder, which is going to fuck up his business or whatever. And then the next scene, he's going into someone seeming extra hot and extra mean for reasons that you're like, okay, he's not mad. He's not mad at because this guy spilled beer all over the table. He's still mad about the other thing. And he's it's very difficult. You really need to have great actors who can really dial that in and make that work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my final thing would just be, the dialogue does occasionally remind me of a foreign language in some ways, which is that there's like, there's a level of understanding. You just reminded me from when characters in the show have a lot of conversations where they're talking about something, but they're sort of talking about something else at the same time that they're talking about. But there's a level of getting used to the dialogue in Deadwood, which is similar to a foreign language, where if you're just learning the language, you're really just going literally off the words that are being said to you. Mm-hmm. Like you're trying to keep up it just by saying like, I know that word, like that's a familiar word. I can track that. And I think that Deadwood is so rewatchable because once you're familiar with the words and the cadence and the syntax, you become much more aware of the layers of conversation that are going on it.
And, we've talked about this a bit before, and I think it is very easy to kind of roll your eyes when people compare it to Shakespeare, because I think most people, when you say that, they immediately think like quality level.
Yeah.
But I think it is not dissimilar to that, because so much of Shakespeare's dialogue in his plays does have multiple meanings.
Yeah.
And the way that he'll use a metaphor or a turn of phrase or something, which is literal to what's happening, but also referencing like the failing of the moral failing of a character.
Yeah.
From something they did later earlier in the play or something. It's just that it has that same kind of feel to it.
Yeah. We're done with this episode. Thanks, everybody. Let us know if you're enjoying the coverage. Let us know if you're enjoying the show. You can join us on Discord if you want to talk about it there. Thanks to that patron for signing up for Deadwood. And we will see you next time with new money. See ya.
I offer these. And I hope you'll wear them a good long fucking time in this fucking camp whose ever fucking thumb we're under. And where it come to me just a few moments ago that the Reverend Smith, may rest his soul, he was found on the road. Apparently murdered by heathens just some months ago. What he said on the subject of you, Mr. Bullock raises the camp up, and I hope he'll reside with us. And improve our general fucking atmosphere for a good long fucking time, even with all the personal complications and fucking disasters that we all fucking have. And where running away solves absolutely fucking nothing.